Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Book the Block, the series where I bring my fantasy novel to life in Minecraft, one block at a time. As I said in the last episode, today's going to be an episode about pathing. So I'm going to make the pathing for both my village and for future locations that I'll build within the world in many future episodes further down the line. So without further ado, let's get started. Before we get into the different paths that I designed for my world, there are 4 things you have to consider when designing a path. First up is shape. You've got 2 main options, straight or curved. Straight paths feel structured and work well for villages, castles, or anything more formal. But if you want something that feels a bit more natural or overgrown, a curved or winding path works better. I like to use a shovel or even temporary blocks to rough out the shape before placing anything in for the final build. Next is the theme, and this is where the surroundings come in. Is your path going through a magical forest, a desert village, an underground ruin? The vibe of the area should guide how fancy, clean, or overgrown your path looks. In my world, I have many different themes throughout, depending on the location, so I prepared many different settings for this video. Now for the fun part, block palette. Try avoiding using just one block, mixing things like dirt, path blocks, coarse dirt, or maybe even rooted dirt. It gives it way more texture. You can also throw in the occasional cracked brick or mossy cobble if that fits your theme. There can also be very put together palettes, like the ones for a clean city. In cases like this, you can keep the main path one block, but have a border of another for a bit of texture and color change. And finally, decorations. These should make your path feel lived in. Try adding bushes, flowers, fallen logs, fences, lantern signs, and maybe even different types of trees surrounding. Think about what makes sense for your world. Each area should have its own unique decoration palette. Alright, so for this video I prepared 9 different pathings. So on the left, these 6 are natural, so the things you'd see out like in a forest and that kind of thing. The 3 on the right are more city types, so more structured. So on the left, I'm using the winding path, and then on the right, these 3 will be using more of the straight path. So let's get into showing you how I built them. So while recording these different paths, I'm going to do this at night so I can highlight the different lightings I've used in some of these different pathings. On the side of the screen, you'll see the different block palettes every time I enter a new area, so you can see what blocks I used for each area. Start off is the fairy path. So this one was very basic, just using the grass and a bit of this moss carpet on top, along with these dirt paths. Very simple for the main path. It's not like a very overly used area. I also used cherry trees and then the flowering azalea trees, just for a bit of decoration on the side. Then the wildflowers, pink petals, and then cactus flowers. These kind of just add a bit more color to the pathing. After that is these little lampposts. So I'm using polished tuff walls for these 2 bits, and then the pale oak fence for the middle, 2 of these polished tuff stairs, a piece of chain, and then a lantern. I think this just helps give a little bit of lighting for this area. You don't want it too compact, you don't want it to be super bright, you're still in nature. So you can spread these out depending on how long your path is going to be. Alright, starting now on the enchanted forest. So as you come in here, the block palette you can see down here. So we have brown mushroom blocks, rooted dirt, the packed mud, and then granite, as well as the dirt path. So we got 5 blocks, so a bit more complex for the path itself. I'm using some of these stone buttons along, as well as this short grass, just to add a bit more texture and detail to the main path itself. On the side, using moss carpets and then the different types of mushrooms, just for a bit more side decorations. As you can see here, this is very open area. This is what you kind of want to avoid. As you go along here, you can see it's more dense. You want it to be a dense forest. For enchanted, you kind of want to have a canopy so you can only sometimes see the stars. I'm also using these firefly bushes, so you can see a lot of them are spawning. If you ever want to get more in a certain area, you can just go down a little bit, dig out a small area, place some in, and then cover back up. And then a lot more are going to spawn. So if you wanted more of a magical feel, this is how you get more fireflies. I also just bone mealed the side for just some natural grass. You can pick and choose for the different flowers you want. If you want to remove and then replace with a certain color, you can go back and do that on your own. I'm also using the pointed dripstone as these kind of little boulders, sharp boulders on the side. These big trees are custom built ones, so they have a bit of hanging. And then I filled in the gaps with just base spruce trees. As we go down a little further here, you can see I've made a couple boulders just using the base cobblestone. So cobblestone, walls, and slabs, just for a bit more texture and detail along the path. As you can see, some hanging around here. You can see I've used chain and these soul lanterns just hanging from different branches throughout, just to give a little bit of a mystic, magical lighting effect. Now onto the enchanted path. So it's very similar to the enchanted forest. So same block palette for the main path itself, just not the big trees surrounding, just occasional small trees, having more of a plains kind of look. Still going in with these firefly bushes, just not quite as many, so you don't need to do quite as many underneath because it's not as contained as in the forest. Still using these pointed dripstones and then the stones for little rocks. And then for a little bit of difference, I've got a big tree that's kind of fallen over and is blocking the path. So it can kind of direct you through here. Got some more of these boulders. And that's kind of the more of the enchanted path, so just a little bit less than the enchanted forest. Now for the abandoned path. So for this one, I'm not using the dirt path for this one, so it's just the coarse rooted and granite. I've used the stones buttons again, and then more of the short grass on the path, showing it's like a little bit more overgrown. I've got these just basic oak trees. You can always do your own custom trees. This was more just to show that it's kind of a forest. And then the cobwebs kind of just to show that it's been neglected and not much comes through here anymore. For lighting, this was what it should look like if it wasn't abandoned. So just a cobblestone wall, these copper trapdoors, and then just a campfire. As you can see here, since it's an abandoned path, it's gone mossy and it's kind of fallen apart and the light's gone out. So it's a little less, it's not as lit up as it could be because it's not been maintained or walked through a lot. I also kind of added these mossy walls along the edge to show that it used to be a nice wall along the edge. And then again, using these fences a little further in shows that they tried to revamp it, add maybe a fence along, but even that's fallen to time. So you can see the different ways of making these falling apart, having them put together a little bit, as well as just using bone meal again, just to add a bit of texture throughout. Now onto the desolate path. So this one uses basalt, cobbled deep slate, and then just regular deep slate for the main path. And then as you go out, you just have the coarse and rooted dirt. If I was doing this for a whole area, I would have made this all of this, so there'd be no grass. It would just be this for the entire region, just to show that nothing grows here anymore. I've used a bit of this glow lichen, just a little bit of lighting throughout the path, just kind of like a mossy growth. And then on the side, I'm using the dead corals, the different types. You can mix and match whichever ones you want to use, as well as this short dry grass. As you go over here, I've used the pale oak, so I just grew a sapling and grew it up. I just think it works well with how grayed out it is, making it look like more of a dead area. You can also add in a little area like this, where it used to be a little nice pond. Used a bit of the pale moss carpet just to show some growths that are left over, and just a sneaky little skeleton skull, just to add a bit more, maybe lore to the area or detail. I also added in these hanging roots on the trees, just a little bit more detail. And the final of the natural paths is the desert path. So using sandstone, sand, and then these are the sandstone stairs. So if you place them upside down, let me get that to work, the bottom looks very cracked and works well with this palette. Then as it goes out, I just kind of made it into just a desert. So using the dead bush, short dry grass, and tall dry grass. And then cactus with the flowers. Sometimes they naturally grow them, but you can use them to stop the growth of a short one like this. I then use stripped oak and birch, find one, just as dead trees that used to stand here. So you can just build a tree, but you just don't have to have the leaves attached to them. So now on to the straight paths, the city builds, if you will. So the first one here is kind of like a dark punk type build. So you're using like these blue lights with this deep slate. So I've kind of just added in city walls so it kind of fits a bit better. So it's not just in the middle of nowhere, but I'll be focusing more on just the path. So for this, it's just the deep slate bricks. Like I said, you can do just one if you want it to be like a more pristine. If you wanted to have it a little different, or like worn, you can use like these cracked ones every so often. But if you want it to be like a high up kept area, you just use the base bricks. And then using the tough brick stairs kind of as like a gutter around this area. And then deep slate tile walls up into a soul campfire using those trapdoors, and then a slab on top kind of just as lighting throughout. I also use these iron bars kind of just as a barrier. So if you want to have things over here, you can. Now onto this more simple stone one. It's more using like medieval type builds. So just the base stone bricks. This time instead of the tough brick stairs, we're just using the polished tough. And then for the kind of barrier, we have these deep slate tiles with just a basic lantern on top. And then the fence gates going throughout. The nice thing about this is when you have them beside the wall, it lowers it a bit, so it kind of gives it a nice arch. I also use these smooth stone just to accent when it's on one of the lighting spaces. And for the last one, we're just doing the brick. I added just the terracotta, granite, and bricks just in like a nice spattering throughout. And then I'm using these polished andesite for both the barrier and then where the lighting will go on top. This one's a little bit more unique. I added a little bit of a bridge here. This can be done for any of these city builds as well as the nature ones. You just have to add in using the block palette you already have. For the natural kind of ones, you want to pick like a wooden bridge of like the trees that are in the area. So for this one, you got a little arching over, and then it comes back down. For the river, I find using mud works better for the bottom rather than dirt. It just gives it a better look, darker. Then just adding a bit of seagrass and lily pads just for a bit of color difference. And that wraps up today's build. I hope walking through these 4 steps of shape, theme, block palette, and decoration helps you look at paths in a new way. Even the simplest trail can completely change the feel of your world when it's done with the right intention. Whether you're building a cozy village, mysterious forest, or something totally unique, just taking the time to think through how others, or even your own character, might walk through the world makes everything feel more connected. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like, and I'd love to hear in the comments what kind of paths you've built, and subscribe for more videos coming soon. I've got some really exciting builds coming up, and paths are just the beginning. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time.